propose to my cousin.
Hey, are you planning on marrying your sibling? Or having children with your cousin? Well,
Don't even think about it.
we wouldn't recommend it.
Well, why not?
Whether your dad is also your uncle or your grandma is your aunt, inbreeding can be confusing. In medieval times, it was quite common, but it had disastrous consequences.
Well, I didn't know she was my sister when I kissed her.
Why does inbreeding lead to health complications in babies? What would your inbred child look like? This is Your Body on Inbreeding. Inbreeding happens when two genetically similar organisms mate. Since we already share 99.9% of our DNA with every other human on Earth, one of the biological purposes of mating is the shuffling of that 0.1% of DNA. The similarity in genetics might be the result of the Toba eruption that took place 75,000 years ago in Indonesia. The volcanic eruption affected the environment and almost got humans wiped out from the Earth. It's estimated that the eruption left the planet with only 1 to 10,000 breeding pairs of humans. So, could you be a result of inbreeding without even knowing? Is that why these celebrities look so much alike? Well, it's a little more complicated. There's a reason why inbreeding goes against social norms in human society, but this wasn't always the case. Prince Charles II of Spain was born in 1661 to King Philip IV of Spain and Mariana of Austria. They were uncle and niece. The family's wishes to maintain the bloodline resulted in a prince who was unable to speak until he was 4 years old and couldn't walk until the age of 8. He had a pronounced underbite and an engorged tongue that prevented him from closing his teeth together. And mentally, he had troubles too. He suffered from hallucinations. So, what caused all of these defects? Well, it boils down to genetics. Humans have 2 sets of 23 stretches of DNA called chromosomes. We get 1 set from mom and 1 from dad. In each of these chromosomes, there are thousands of genes that determine physical and biological features. Genes can be dominant or recessive. When one of the genes is dominant, the baby will get the trait from that gene, but if both the genes are recessive, it will originate a recessive gene. This is known as an autosomal recessive gene. When 2 copies of an abnormal gene are passed on to offspring, it can lead to congenital disabilities and genetic diseases. This phenomenon happens when there's a limited gene pool in a species. Inbreeding limits the gene pool and, by doing so, reduces the number of available healthy mates. This can eventually cause a population decrease. Just ask Neanderthals. Yeah, they'd tell you that this isn't a good idea. Wait, right, they can't tell you that because they're extinct. And they're extinct because... yeah, you guessed it, because they inbred. Neanderthals lived in smaller populations, so it makes sense that they mated with their close relatives. This theory was proposed based on the analyzed genome sequence of a Neanderthal woman. The results showed that her parents were half-siblings. Homozygosity is possessing 2 identical traits of a gene. This is determined by the relationship between your parents.
You two make a cute couple.
For instance, if your parents were siblings, they'd have many genes in common. And I'm not just talking about denim pants.
Oh, you're my sister!
If the parents both carry the same genetic mutation, the child is at a higher risk of an autosomal recessive disease like sickle cell disease or cystic fibrosis. Monozygotic twins share 100% of their genes. A parent and child share 50%. You share a quarter of your genes with your aunt and only an eighth with your cousins. Without a history of autosomal recessive conditions in the family, first cousins have more than a 90% chance of having a perfectly healthy baby. But that doesn't mean that you should fall in love with your first cousin and have babies. Even if the inbred children turn out to be healthy in the first generation, the long-term effects to offspring could be reduced fertility, reduced birth weight, higher infant and child mortality, reduced immune function, and facial asymmetry. Remember Charles II? Cognitive disabilities, reduced muscular function, and decreased lung function are other possible consequences of mating with your family.
You made out with your sister!
Number 8. Blue fugates. These people aren't Smurfs or the Na'vi from Avatar, but the fugates from Kentucky. Since 1820, the family lived in isolation for over a century and only married within their own ranks.
You made out with your sister, man! Shut up!
But where did their blue look come from?
I'm blue.
According to research, it was the result of a recessive mutation in the CYB5R gene. This mutation leads to a blood disorder known as methemoglobinemia, which tints the skin blue, especially in the lips and fingers. Years of inbreeding increased the odds of the blue look. By the 1960s, their ancestors started to resent it. Luckily, a hematologist came to the rescue. He gave them pills containing methylene blue dye, which counteracted their condition. Within minutes, the blueness faded away. So much for auditioning for the Blue Man Group. This is just one of the many medical outcomes of inbreeding. If you've got the hots for your cousin or your aunt, you may want to pay attention to this video before you take any chances. This is Your Body On 8 Reasons Why You Shouldn't Inbreed. Number 7. The Habsburg Jaw. In 13th century Germany, the royal Habsburg family took power. Their rule extended to many European kingdoms, but they are most famous for their monarchy in Spain, for various jaw-dropping reasons. They were a close-knit family, to say the least, and they did not want any outside interference to threaten their power. Throughout their Spanish reign from 1516 to 1700 CE, only 2 out of 11 marriages weren't incestuous.
So that's how it is in their family.
As their lineage grew, so too did their jaws, and not in the flattering Zac Efron way.
Yeah.
This particular genetic feature, known as mandibular prognathism, leads to symptoms like a protruding jawline, misalignment of teeth, and difficulty breathing, swallowing, and talking. It's a condition that affects only 2 to 4% of adults around the world, but for the Habsburgs, it was much more common. The most famous Habsburg by far was King Charles II. He was the product of 16 generations of family inbreeding, and well, it showed.
Woof.
Poor young Charles didn't speak until he was 4 years old due to his deformed jaw. He was short, weak, and impotent. To make matters worse, he had constant stomach problems and suffered from epilepsy and developmental delays. He produced no heirs and died when he was only 38. Autopsies reveal that his lungs were corroded, his intestines were rotten, and his head was full of water. But he's not the only royal to suffer from a horny family.
Horny. Yeah. Crazy horny.
King Tut's disease. When his golden tomb was discovered in 1922, the legendary pharaoh King Tutankhamun became a worldwide phenomenon. Despite all the grandeur, his reign and life in Egypt were short. Tut ascended the throne at only 9 years old, but passed away at the age of 18 with no heirs to his name. His death puzzled scientists for decades, with theories ranging from a chariot crash to murder. But years later, molecular genetic analysis and thousands of CT scans revealed a different story. While most accounts regaled him as a handsome young pharaoh, in truth, he was a physically deformed teen who had to walk with a cane. With Tut's parents keeping it all in the family, scientists believe his ancestral lineage was the cause of his predicaments. He had a clubbed foot from Kohler's disease, a rare genetic disorder that leads to foot bone necrosis. He also had fused neck vertebrae due to Klippel-Feil syndrome, and a raging malaria infection to top it all off. If your family tree resembles a pyramid like Tut's did, your odds of hereditary conditions increases with every generation, even diabetes. Number 5. Neonatal diabetes. One of the most fatal consequences of generational inbreeding is Walcott-Rollison syndrome, or WRS, an incredibly rare genetic form of diabetes. While type 1 diabetes affects about 8.4 million people around the globe, WRS has been reported in only 100 children to date. It arises due to mutations in the EIF2AK3 gene, which can affect your body's cells and their ability to respond to stress. As a result, several symptoms can occur, including permanent diabetes, abnormal bone development, liver failure, and developmental delays, to name a few. 25% of all cases of WRS have come from children of consanguineous marriages. That's a fancy term for sharing the same ancestor. Number 4. Huntington's disease. Huntington's disease is an extremely rare condition affecting about 3 out of 100,000 people worldwide. The debilitating disease causes your nerve cells to break down over time, making you slowly lose function over your body. This terrible affliction strikes people in their 30s and 40s and features a range of symptoms, from twitching and trouble swallowing to poor memory recall and impulse control. It also has a high likelihood of obsessive-compulsive disorder, depression, and bipolar disorder. Sadly, life expectancy is between 10 to 30 years. Many isolated communities in fishing villages near Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela have been affected by Huntington's. It is believed that over 200 years ago, one woman who carried the mutation settled in the village and gave birth to 10 children. After 2 centuries of interbreeding, now 1 out of every 10 people in the area have the disease. Number 3. Hemophilia. Queen Victoria was known as the grandmother of modern Europe, and for good reason. 9 of her children and 42 of her grandchildren married into royal families across Europe, spreading their rule over Germany, Russia, and Spain. While Queen Vic's descendants were taking powerful positions across European empires, the British monarch passed along an unknowing gift to her progeny: hemophilia B. People with hemophilia B bleed longer than usual and are more prone to bruising and internal bleeding. The Queen's son, Prince Leopold, the Duke of Albany, passed away from a brain hemorrhage after taking a spill. Her young grandson also died from internal bleeding after falling out of a window, and several other descendants suffered similar blood-related fates. Number 2. Angelman syndrome. Unfortunately, despite the name, there is nothing angelic about this syndrome. Angelman syndrome is a rare genetic disorder that affects the nervous system. It's a result of the mutation of the gene UBE3A. We inherit 2 copies of the UBE3A gene, one from each parent. Both copies are active throughout our body's tissues, but the brain only uses the mother's copy. If this copy gets deleted by a mutation, the protein can lead to a host of problems. These can include intellectual disabilities, trouble sleeping, seizures, and more. For some, it can result in a small skull and abnormal curving of the spine. But the most bizarre symptom of all is constant laughing and a happy personality. While it's rare, the chances increase if you're keeping it in the family. Number 1. Ostrich people. In the northern Kayemba region of Zimbabwe, Africa, resides the Vedoma tribe. Their elders claim they hail from the baobab tree, and various origin stories passed down through generations describe their paternal ancestors as having a bird-like appearance. Whether or not the stories are true, you would think they hold weight just by looking at the tribe members' hands and feet. Many of the Vedoma people have fingers and toes that look more bird-like than human, earning them their ostrich people nickname. This is due to a disorder called ectrodactyly, or split hand-foot malformation. It causes the toes and fingers to fuse together with a space in the middle, much like a bird's foot. SHFM is quite rare. Only around 1 in 90,000 people are at risk of the disorder. But in the case of the Vedoma tribe, the prevalence is much higher. Their laws prohibit marrying outsiders from other tribes. As a result, about 1 out of 4 Vedoma children are born with fused toes or fingers. Throughout history, inbreeding was used as a means of keeping bloodlines strong. But in many cases, it had the opposite effect. especially over several generations of incestual hanky-panky. But despite the risks, marrying within the family is still a common practice in some areas of the Middle East, South Asia, and Africa. In Pakistan alone, 65% of marriages are between cousins. This is done to strengthen family ties, maintain caste and status among partners, and even keep familiarity between in-laws.
Whoa! There's the sexiest second-grade teacher I've ever seen in my life! Oh, that was a good one!
Sure, it might be nice to have your cool aunt as your mother-in-law, but if you decide to have kids with your kin, well, you'd be rolling the dice.
Charles II of Spain. In the 17th century, King Charles II of the Spanish Habsburg dynasty earned the unfavorable title, the Bewitched. And for good reason. Charles came from a long lineage of family hanky-panky, part of an effort to keep Spain's royal bloodline pure and strong.
Like a bull.
While they were powerful political rulers, the Habsburg family romances led to health problems for their many descendants. And, well, Charles got the brunt of them. He had a protruding jaw, a large tongue, and various physical and mental impairments. Poor Charlie didn't speak until he was 4 due to his facial deformities. He was short, weak, and impotent, and to make matters worse, he had constant stomach problems and suffered from epilepsy and developmental delays. He produced no heirs and died when he was only 38. Autopsies revealed that his lungs were corroded, his intestines were rotten, and his head was full of water. But he's not the only royal to suffer from a horny family.
Horny? Yeah. Crazy horny.
Can being inbred make you murderous? And can it make your pee turn blue? Let's take a dive into the historical gene pool to find out. This is your body on the most inbred people in history. Elizabeth Bathory. Our next example takes us back to the 16th century, where we uncover the shocking story of Elizabeth Bathory, a Hungarian countess with a dark reputation. Born into Protestant nobility, her bloodline suffered from generations of inbreeding, but one might argue her servants suffered far more blood-related mishaps. Elizabeth was known for her obsession with beauty and youth. So much so, she purportedly bathed in the blood of virgin women for its rejuvenating qualities.
Yikes.
Historians claim that she practiced cannibalism, committed heinous sex crimes, and regularly tortured and murdered her servants. Oh, what a gem. Some reports indicate that she even covered one of her victims in honey and pushed them into swarms of bees to please her husband.
No, not the bees! Not the bees!
The Encyclopedia Britannica has given her a kill count of more than 600 women. More often than not, it was her servants who took the fall. But eventually, in 1610, investigations were held, putting Elizabeth as the prime suspect. She was arrested and imprisoned in Say Castle for the murder of just 80 women. Yeah, she got off easy. Many historians speculate that her mental instability may have been linked to her family's history of inbreeding. But it's very likely it could have been due to her exposure to violence growing up. This vampiric villainess has undoubtedly earned herself an evil reputation. Cleopatra. You may think of Cleopatra as the iconically beautiful last queen of Egypt, but her genetics might tell a different story. Born in 69 BCE, Cleopatra came from generations of inbreeding in the Ptolemy family. Her parents were siblings, which was customary at the time for kings wanting to secure their royal bloodlines. In fact, more than a dozen of her ancestors mated with their cousins or siblings. Even Cleo followed suit and married 2 of her brothers to keep the bloodline strong.
You're weird.
You're weird.
Whatever, Cleopatra.
Many movies, plays, and books have portrayed her as one of the most gorgeous women in the world, one who used her looks to seduce powerful men.
Come on, babe. I've been waiting in this chariot forever.
Caesar, get out! I'm getting
But archaeologists have uncovered a much less westernized version of Cleo. Forensic studies have revealed that she likely had a hooked nose, a pointy chin, and a small forehead. And she didn't look a thing like Elizabeth Taylor. Still, she managed to woo a few mighty Romans, including General Mark Antony and the infamous Julius Caesar. She was highly educated, spoke more than a dozen languages, and thrived as a ruler, diplomat, and naval commander. Put that on your Tinder profile. But all accolades aside, Cleo was no saint. After teaming up with Caesar, she waged civil war on 2 of her brother husbands, leading to their untimely deaths. She also had her sister Arsinoe killed to protect her spot on the throne. As for her own demise, it's believed Cleopatra died from a snake bite. Legend claims she enticed an asp to bite her arm, and well, the rest is herstory. But Cleopatra isn't the only famous Egyptian royal with an inbred past. King Tutankhamun. When his golden tomb was discovered in 1922, the legendary pharaoh King Tutankhamun became a worldwide superstar. Despite all the grandeur, his life and reign in Egypt were short. Tut ascended to the throne at only 9 years old and passed away at the age of 18, with no heirs to his name. His death puzzled scientists for decades, with theories ranging from a chariot crash to murder. But years later, molecular genetic analysis and thousands of CT scans revealed a different story. While most accounts celebrated him as a handsome young pharaoh, the truth is he was a physically deformed teen who had to walk with a cane. Yeah, with Tut's parents keeping it all in the family, scientists believe his incestual lineage was the cause of his predicaments. He had a clubbed foot from Kohler's disease, a rare genetic disorder that leads to foot bone necrosis. He also had fused neck vertebrae due to Klippel-Feil syndrome, and to top it all off, had a raging case of malaria. If your family tree resembles a pyramid like Tut's did, your odds of hereditary conditions increase with every generation, including madness. King George III. King George III of England's genes were particularly pickled as the descendant of the House of Hanover, a family with a rich history of inbreeding and hemophilia. He became infamous for losing Britain's American colonies during the American Revolution of the 18th century, but he was just as known for his madness and for his blue urine.
Do it, England. Do it.
Yeah, you heard that right. Many believe he suffered from the congenital disease porphyria, which can lead to problems with your nervous system and skin, and reddish-purple urine due to excess porphyrins in your bloodstream. Over time, porphyria can contribute to digestive problems, mental confusion, and muscle pain. But some historians believe King George may have developed his mental illness naturally, something the British royal family did not want to admit.
And I concluded that yes, he was ill, but he was not insane.
And as for the blue pea, it could be due to George taking medicine made from gentian, a bluish flower known for treating digestive issues. It's theorized that he had a bipolar disorder, known for bouts of mania and mood swings. In his manic moments, his writing was noticeably different. The sentences would be over 400 words long, with lots of creative and colorful language. And he was quite the talker, too. He would ramble incessantly for hours, to the point of foaming at the mouth. And he often suffered violent convulsions that required his servants to hold him down and keep him from hurting himself. A visitor to Windsor once witnessed him trying to plant a stake in the castle grounds, hoping it would grow into a beef tree. Yeah. Poor George was regularly subjected to crude attempts to cure his insanity, from arsenic-laden powders that made his skin burn to straitjackets and ice baths. But not all mad rulers are alike. Have you ever had a psycho boss?
We have sort of a problem here.
Well, we'll explore why they're more common than you think on another episode of Your Body On.